Yesterday, DICE officially responded in a true behemoth of a Reddit post. More than 5,600 words long, community manager Part Welsh took upon himself the difficult task of trying to explain the purpose and reasoning behind the coming weapon balance update, part of patch 5.2. Now, by no means is that an easy task, and while this video will be most critical of DICE and its decision as well as reasoning, I believe it's important to point out that the community managers, those you interact with on Reddit or on the forums, are not the ones to blame for these decisions. They don't make these decisions, they simply relay them to us. So in the most classic of mottos, don't shoot the messenger. In today's video then, I will start by summarizing what DICE has stated as regards the purpose, scope and reason for the coming weapon balance changes. I'll be doing this focusing strictly on the information provided without commentary or analysis. Therefore, you can make up your own mind as to what you think of the reasons provided and the changes that are coming. In the second half of this video, however, I'll go into detail as to what these changes actually mean for Battlefield 5, drawing not only on my own experiences, but also the official information provided by DICE and the opinions of those who truly understand how weapon mechanics work in Battlefield 5. While it is absolutely important to have both sides of this debate, it's vital that false rumors and lies are dispelled. The Battlefield community deserves the truth, and currently some members of this community are choosing to ignore simple facts in order to presumably garner favor with DICE. Now, anyone is free to have their own opinion. I support that. If you like these weapon balance changes, that is absolutely fine. You can come away from watching today's video thinking that this is a good move for DICE to make. What isn't okay, at least with me, is if you're spouting demonstrably false claims, especially when you have a large audience that trusts you to report on Battlefield related matters relatively impartially or at least truthfully. Let's jump into the official comments by DICE. As regards the purpose, aim or vision for these gameplay balance changes, they hope to accomplish numerous things. Firstly, they wish to foster a larger variety of playstyles within each weapon class, as well as create more discrete ranges for each weapon class, thus increasing the variety within the classes themselves, but also amongst the general weaponry available for infantry players as a whole. Additionally to that, they want to adjust weapon meta to allow for less popular weapons to become more popular and more used, and reduce certain unwanted aspects of the current meta, for example, MMG prone camping. They also want to make Battlefield easier for new players to get into, get a few kills without reducing, however, the skill ceiling for higher tier players. What they don't want to do, their so-called anti-vision, what they seek to avoid is change the lethality and average time to kill of the game at the intended ranges for weapons, and further especially at close range and when flanking. They actually repeat this statement multiple times throughout the post, and further go on to state that with the help of recoil modifications, often in form of reductions, as well as in select cases fire rate upgrades as well as other balance changes, they hope that the bullet to kill reductions will be somewhat essentially compensated for by the other buffs and increases and changes to the weaponry. And lastly, they state that this is not for the Christmas noobs. These changes supposedly have long been in the works, and although initially meant to release with Chapter 5, they weren't ready at the time and thus will be coming with Update 5.2. Now, while that is the aim, the purpose of their change, they've also provided several reasons for why they're going through them as they are. They currently state that guns are balanced in a relatively narrow spectrum, with relatively similar damage per second values across the board and across several different categories. DICE claims that this means skilled players simply stick to a few weapons and make them work at most ranges. In turn, this results in a reduced variety of viable weapons. Further, the balance doesn't cater to a variety of playstyles. Highly skilled players are left without options, at least according to DICE. Further to that variety argument, they wish to reduce frustrations with Battlefield 5. When players specifically quit is something they seem to want to address with this patch, at least as regards to the gameplay changes. One of those points they mention are unfair or unbalanced situations, where essentially as player you have no chance, and what they cite here is higher level players that have better guns. And specifically, they state that they hope to address this by increasing the viability of some weapons and also limiting certain weapons to their intended engagement distances. They also cover being shot in the back without the opportunity to respond, specifically at longer ranges, whereas seemingly closer range flanking is apparently not as frustrating and doesn't cause as many players to actually leave or rage quit. Lastly then, longer range combat supposedly is undesirable as it is more frustrating and quite hard. With average combat distances supposedly being longer in Battlefield 5 than in Battlefield 4 or Battlefield 1, they specifically hope to bring the current 22 to 25 meters average combat distance down to about 12 to 15 as it was with Battlefield 4. Now it's worth noting that these average combat distances are actually the average distance at which you are killed by somebody else, not necessarily the average distance at which you choose to engage somebody, for example, by taking down half their health. Thus, this is strictly limited to where you die, but is nevertheless an indication that combat generally takes place at longer ranges in Battlefield 5 compared to, for example, Battlefield 4 or Battlefield 1. They also state that frustration with core gameplay has been increasing over time. Separate from the bugs and technical issues supposedly, they were able to garner this from surveys, with initially gameplay being largely satisfactory to the community, but increasingly that no longer being the case, according to what DICE has stated. Those are the reasons why they want to change the meta and why they're making these balanced gameplay adjustments. As to whether these changes are going to happen no matter what the community says about them, according to the information provided, short of an express official confirmation, essentially yes, they're committed to tweaking and further fine-tuning this new game meta, but there's no mention of the option for reversing these if things don't go as planned and the community doesn't like the changes once they go live. So that all at face value honestly seems quite good. There's no intended reductions to time to kill, at least that is what DICE is saying. An increase in variety of weaponry and making more weapons viable is never a bad thing. I personally find the variety of weaponry to be viable in Battlefield 5 to be much better than in past Battlefield titles and frankly quite good, but it can always get better. Reducing frustrating deaths is something I am always getting behind as somebody who has quite a tendency to rage quit, and thus I can absolutely get behind these as goals or issues that they want to address. The problem is they have close to no resemblance to the truth and the consequence of the announced not weapon balance changes, but really time to kill nerfs. This is where we jump from part 1 of the video, focusing on information provided by DICE, to part 2, where we look at the actual consequences of the time to kill shift and how it stacks up to the reasons provided by DICE. Now we're going to go through a number of statements made mostly by DICE but also by the community as large that relate to these time to kill changes. And the first is, we don't know how these changes will affect the game until they release. Now simply put, to respond to this, yes we do. DICE has deliberately provided us with information on what these changes mean in general, why they are supposedly being made, and more importantly, specifically how they will affect a set of exemplary weapons. Can we understand every finer detail how this will affect gameplay? Of course not. The big picture, however, is crystal clear, and there's no denying the logical consequences of these changes. As regards the claim there's not going to be a change to time to kill, I could draw an expert like KHT, known on Twitter as GCHD, link in the description, who's responsible for the time to kill analysis of pretty much all of Battlefield 5's weaponry from as early as the beta to as recently as the Pacific patch. He really knows his stuff when it comes to weaponry. And he would tell you, as he's told me, there is no way that recoil reductions are going to be sufficient to compensate for the increases in bullets to kill. Also, there is no way that any realistic fire rate is going to be able to compensate for the increases in bullets to kill. He will go on to prove this with time to kill charts on the basis of data provided by DICE, but why make things so complicated when I can frankly quote DICE from the very same post we're reporting on as to how time to kill is going to increase. They detail it both for the STG-44 and the M1928 and include their respective recoil reductions as well. The STG will behave frankly largely similar within 10 to 30 meters as it previously did. It's now supposed intended combat distance. Outside of that, thanks to the bullet to kill changes and lack of increase to fire rate, as well as a only small decrease to recoil, there's a significant reduction in its realistic time to kill on any target. And if you think 30 meters is somehow suddenly long range, a quick demonstration of how close 30 meters really looks in game. Worse off, of course, is the Tommy gun, or more accurately the M1928, because across the board, there's an increase to time to kill here, from 250 milliseconds to 330, sub 10 meters, and from 350 to 417, between 10 to 15 meters. That's apparently where the ideal engagement distance of the M1928 now ends, 15 meters, which, again, is not exactly very long, and beyond 15 meters, is realistically very much still within close quarters if you've ever played any FPS game, especially Battlefield 5. Those then are the intended engagement distances according to DICE. After that, things get significantly worse both for the Tommy and the STG in terms of their time to kills. So yes, the differences, the nerfs to time to kills for these weapons become even more pronounced after these already detailed nerfs at their ideal engagement distances. What about the claim then of increased variety of weaponry and more defined engagement distances for weapons? Now they've stated they want to bring down the average engagement distance from 20 to 25 meters as it currently is to 12 to 15 meters. And I would argue that that directly results in the reduction of variety of weaponry. Essentially, but for the SLRs, bolt-action carbines, bolt-action rifles, and AT rifles, 3 out of 4 of those weapon categories being exclusive to the Scout, all remaining weaponry has to compete for the sub-30, maybe sub-40 engagement distance space. The result, in my opinion, is going to be relatively clear. With maps being open and sightlines long, there's going to be a massive push from ARs, SMGs, and LMGs to bolt-action carbines, SLRs, and bolt-action rifles. These weapons are going to dominate the majority of engagement distances, and the meta is going to be more campy, more long range, and definitely less diversified than it currently is, achieving essentially the very opposite of what we currently have. Now, I am in no way suggesting that post 30 meters, post 40 meters, something like an SCG is going to become entirely useless, unable to actually down a target. Not something I can necessarily actually claim for the long range use of the M1928, but they are going to become so much less effective that choices such as, for example, the ZH-29, an already excellent weapon available for the Scouts, are going to become the new ARs or the new semi-autos used at all but extreme close quarters and extreme long ranges for the majority of gameplay scenarios. I know that's what I'm going to do if I find my automatic weapons no longer able to kill anybody outside of 20 to 30, maximum 40 meters. Moving on to a point about game meta then, and also, once more to a certain degree, the versatility and viability of weapon. Range versatile weapons have always been generally the community's favorite. You want an example of that? Go back to Battlefield 4 and look at the assault rifle dominant meta that was the case there. Because not only did it have access to medics, but more importantly, it had one of the most versatile, if not the most versatile class of weaponry, capable of doing damage essentially all the way from close quarters to medium-long ranges. This is one of the reasons, frankly, why Battlefield 5's weapon mechanics are so popular as they are now, because most of the weapon categories have a certain flexibility to them, meaning there's not just one class of weaponry everybody has to gravitate to if they don't want a weapon that is restricted to only one set engagement distance. The SMGs as they are currently implemented in the game can't keep up with assault rifles at medium range. The assault rifles are not capable of out-damaging SMGs in close quarter. That is as designed. It gives the player who chooses the correct weapon a clear advantage. The fact that these weapons aren't completely useless outside of their intended engagement distance doesn't invalidate that, but simply means that the increased flexibility allows players not only to move up onto objectives when they need to, but also to get into the position where they can use their weapons at their ideal engagement distance. It also makes those weapon categories a far more viable choice, because let's be honest, engagement distances and combat scenarios vary hugely on every single map in Battlefield 5. You simply, with a few very select exceptions, such as Operation Underground, cannot say on this map, I am only going to require a weapon that is good between 10 and 30 meters, and anything before that or anything after that is not necessary for this map. But for, as said, basically Operation Underground, maybe Devastation, maybe Marita, all other maps do not conform to that meta, and those maps are always essentially based on close quarter only. Thus, what I'm trying to get at here is a more flexible weapon approach still leaves the advantages of using your weapons at the correct engagement distances very much in place, while still facilitating dynamic, objective-focused gameplay. It makes weapon choices relevant, but not impeding to the overall flow and fun of a game. The notion that hard capping the engagement distance of weapons results in better balance, to me personally, is frankly pretty silly. It simply results in those weapons not being chosen. You need an example for that? Look at the SMGs in Battlefield 5 at launch. They were deeply unpopular because they were completely range ineffective due to spread and recoil values. DICE subsequently, through multiple patches, had to address this to make the SMGs and thus the medic class a viable choice for more medium range engagements for most of the conquest focused maps. And if you thought SMGs at launch were bad, things are going to get a lot worse with this upcoming update. SMGs have never been as weak as they will be after the coming TTK change. Moving on then to one of the final points, frustration with the game. This is a key aspect DICE is looking to address with this update, and frankly something I can usually get behind with. DICE points out that these gameplay changes are meant to reduce frustration with the game. These time to kill changes are meant to reduce frustration with this game. But the points they bring up in support of that have actually nothing to do with the proposed time to kill changes they are introducing. Being shot in the back and instantly dying at longer ranges is not something that an SMG is capable of. SMGs already require 7 or 8 shots beyond 50 meters. Even if you were to hit all your shots at 51 meters with a Tommy gun, something which frankly is quite unlikely given its recoil, it would take you 2/3 of a second to actually down your target. For reference, that's about 2.7 times longer than an absolute extreme close quarters. If that's an instant death, you have no time to react there, then frankly all engagement distances are suddenly considered instant death and you have no opportunity to react to, because that is one of the longer time to kills currently available at any range for a weapon intended to actually function at that engagement distance. These insta deaths where you have no opportunity to react to generally only happen in close quarter as the result of SMGs and MMGs, and at longer ranges at the hands of bolt action carbines, bolt action rifles when headshotting, and AT rifles. Those 3 weapon categories allow for instant deaths where you have literally no time to react, and those are the weapons that frankly are being left unchanged with this patch. Yes, MMGs are a frustrating part of the game. They need to be addressed, but leaving them as camping only options, simply making them useless in terms of damage, is hardly the solution. And though I'm happy DICE is trying to address the MMGs, even that does not validate this time to kill shift in terms of reducing frustration in Battlefield 5. As DICE partially recognized in their post, frustration in Battlefield 5 is driven by a whole host of factors. But for the AT rifles though and MMG camping, those really aren't related to gunplay at all. The issues that really stand out are team balancing, something that has been an issue as early as Battlefield 5's alpha. Hackers, especially prominent of course on PC in certain regions of the world. Bugs and technical issues, still many of them plaguing the game. Netcode could be significantly better, we all know that. Lacking content, now increasingly frankly no longer a problem, yay for the Pacific. What is still very much a problem is vehicle combat, be that between aircraft, between tanks, or between infantry and tanks. The Pacific Plains and their incendiary bombs truly are something out of a World War II horror game, not only in terms of the experience, but also in terms of the balance of pilots consistently going 50-0 game for game. Assignments is another issue we could mention, both in their sometimes ridiculous and silly mastery requirements, but also in the fact that you can't equip them in-game. You have to leave the server to equip new assignments. The list really goes on and on. But I've yet to hear any notable outcry claiming that assault rifles shouldn't be effective beyond 30 or 40 meters and SMGs should be restricted in their engagement distances to less than the distance I can throw a grenade in Battlefield 5. The final and last point that I really need to make here in today's relatively long video is who is this community DICE is supposedly catering to? Because again and again I hear that our player base far exceeds those that are part of the online conversation, so clearly vehemently opposed to these changes. I also hear comments by certain content creators regarding the cesspool that is the Battlefield Reddit community, and one shouldn't listen to those that express their opinions online. And while it's absolutely true, these online platforms only represent a part of the community, that doesn't mean that the rest of the community automatically disagrees with them, as DICE and some other individuals like to frequently somehow mistakenly claim. I frequently ask my viewers their opinions on current Battlefield issues via community polls. You'll find one up as this video goes live on this very issue of the TTK change. And guess what? They generally agree with what the rest of the community is stating, be that on Twitter, Reddit, the Battlefield forums, Discord communities, whatever form of community that you want to list. I've yet to see evidence that the wide consensus on gunplay being largely good in Battlefield 5 and these time to kill changes being unwanted is a misrepresentation of the community as whole, be it by my viewers here on YouTube or Twitter polls, or be it on the previously mentioned Battlefield forums or Reddit. We all seem to be in relative agreement that these changes are unwarranted, fail to make Battlefield 5 a better game, let alone help accomplish the goals set out as reasons by DICE, and lacking any other explanation seem to be an attempt by DICE to make the game noob-friendly at the cost of its existing community and recent trends in FPS gaming. COD Modern Warfare, Rainbow Six Siege are only two examples of the FPS genre moving away from a casual player focus, and really for them, it's paying off. So to wrap things up, I for my part disagree with these changes to the extreme. I think they are ruining what is an excellent part of Battlefield 5, undermine its design philosophy, squander any goodwill DICE was able to regain with the Pacific content, and update, and most importantly, demonstrate that DICE is not beyond going expressly against the will of the community and attempting to mislead them to the nature of their actions in the process. Communication is great, but not if what is put forward is at best misleading or at its worst, patently obviously false. But that pretty much wraps it up for the time to kill changes for now. Feel free to share your own opinions down below. If you enjoyed the video, a rating would be much appreciated. But with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 5 video.